Hello everyone, my name is Gregory Schulz and I'm an attorney with Shumway Van Hansen here in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm coming to you today because I want to spend a few minutes talking about investment fraud. One of the sad and frustrating parts of being a lawyer is people will frequently approach you because they've lost money in an investment that they made. And these investments in which people lose money have a lot of common elements. And so today I want to talk to you about how to avoid investment fraud. And so to begin with, I'm going to go over some common signs of fraud. Now, there are a variety of these sorts of lists that are put out by the Utah Division of Securities or the Securities and Exchange Commission or other consumer protection type bodies, and they're excellent. I just want to add to that discussion a little bit by putting forward what I think are some of the most common signs of a fraudulent transaction. The first one is that the transaction doesn't make sense to you. If you're looking at a transaction and the transaction doesn't make any sense, you don't understand how you're going to make money, you don't understand why anyone would enter into such a deal, then it's probably not a good thing for you to do. Give yourself some credit. You may not be a mortgage-backed securities broker, but if the deal doesn't make sense, that's probably because it's not a good deal. The second one is if the transaction promises an unusually high rate of return. So if people say there's going to be a 40% return on investment or a 20% return on investment, you need to be very skeptical. Remember, there are people who scour the globe looking for good investment opportunities. So if someone promises you a 40% rate of return on a particular transaction, the question you need to be asking yourself is, if a 40% rate of return is available on this transaction, why isn't Goldman Sachs investing some of their portfolio money here? Or why aren't large venture capitalists investing? If a 40% rate of return is really available, why are they soliciting you for it? There are lots of other people who have money and who are eager to give it away. The third thing, and this is something that I'm seeing increasingly often in investment fraud cases, is the fraudster will build and operate some sort of factory. So the fraudster might say, we're making this brand new kind of magnetic frictionless bearing or something. And what they'll do is they'll build a factory so that they can invite you to their factory and show you the production line that's making this technologically advanced, very sophisticated magnetic frictionless bearing. So just because they have a factory they can invite you to doesn't mean that they're a legitimate company. There are lots of factories out there that appear to be producing something, but the factory is being operated with the money from investors, and it's mostly there as a showpiece. Fourth, be very suspicious if you hear about an investment from a friend, a neighbor, or a church or another kind of community group. This is sort of similar to what I said before. There are entire industries devoted to making sure that money can find its way to legitimate businesses. The purpose of the venture capital industry is nothing but making sure that worthwhile businesses can get good funding. There are people out there looking for potential opportunities all the time. And so if someone comes to you at church or leans over the backyard fence and says, hey, I have an investment opportunity for you, that usually means they couldn't get money from the banking system, they couldn't get money through traditional venture capital, and there's a reason that they're coming to you. And usually that reason isn't particularly good. Fifth, don't be fooled by where people say things like, this is patented technology. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office gives out lots of patents. And just because the USPTO issues a patent does not mean that that's some sort of guarantee that the technology is economically viable or that it actually works in practice. You can patent pretty much anything. The only thing that the USPTO requires a working model for in order to patent is perpetual motion machines. And I hope you didn't need this internet video to tell you that you ought not to invest in someone who purports to be offering you a perpetual motion machine. So just because someone waves a patent in front of you, that's not as if it is the US government's guarantee that this invention is going to work. Not at all. And the sixth thing is, just don't get involved in transactions that involve securities in a foreign country. Sure, there are legitimate securities markets in Europe and Asia, but 99 times out of 100, when someone comes to the US and approaches you saying, hey, let's do this complicated transaction that involves European securities, it's fraud. So unless you are already an international investment banker, if someone wants you to do something with a European stock exchange, run away. It's fraud. Almost certainly. Now, there are ways to be safe. The first and best thing to do is talk to a lawyer. If someone approaches you with a securities transaction and you don't understand it and it doesn't make sense, but you're still thinking about investing because you trust them and they're a good friend or a family member, talk to an attorney. An attorney will help you understand if the transaction is legitimate or not. Now, an attorney can't guarantee that you'll receive a particular return on your investment, but what the attorney can do, particularly if they've worked in this area, is they can give you a sense of if this is the kind of transaction which is frequently the subject of fraud, and they can help you understand if the documentation you're receiving is adequate, if the transaction is even legal. Certain kinds of investment transactions must comply with a variety of federal laws, and you don't want to invest in one that hasn't. So they can help you understand if the transaction is legal. They can tell you the right questions to ask to help vet the transaction. There are tremendous benefits to talking to an attorney if you're not sure about an investment. Now, obviously that's self-serving. I'm a lawyer. I'd be happy to talk to you if you're considering a particular investment, but an attorney can really help. Secondly, and this is particularly true with real estate, be very wary of investing in any kind of a real estate investment unless there is a closing title and escrow company involved. So don't pay money with the anticipation of receiving title to real estate later. Give money to a closing company in exchange for title to real estate that will be given to you now. Because I've seen it happen, that people get involved in a real estate investment project, they pay money, but then they never actually wind up receiving title to the real estate that they were supposed to get. So don't put your money forward until you know that you can get title to the real estate. Third, in terms of ways to be safe, talk to an engineer or a scientist about just someone that you know, just a friend of yours who understands science, physics, and engineering. That if someone's talking about a new technology that sounds spectacular, some kind of machine that will increase the fuel efficiency in cars by 4 or 5-fold, you should talk to someone who understands fuel efficiency physics and how engines work. Because people are always coming up with ideas for products, but it turns out that those products frequently violate the laws of physics and can't actually function. Even if someone claims to show you what is a working model of such a device, don't do it. There are plenty of videos on YouTube where people are purporting to demonstrate perpetual motion machines or other similarly ridiculous unlimited power sources. It doesn't pencil. It's not possible. But even if it's not a perpetual motion machine, if someone is offering you the opportunity to invest in a device, I just see this business of dramatically increasing fuel economy quite frequently. You also see ones that generate a lot of electricity for basically no fuel. So things that are unlimited power generation are also very suspicious. Green energy projects that you don't understand are pretty common nowadays. But anyway, so talk to a scientist or an engineer about whether or not what you're being pitched is actually feasible. Fourth and finally, don't invest in a venture unless you have spare cash that you can just afford to play with. I have seen far too many people invest more money than they could afford to lose into these one-shot ventures. Remember the old adage, don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's especially true with investing. That if you throw a good chunk of your retirement income or your savings at one of these ventures, there's a good chance you'll lose it. And so don't invest in ventures like this unless you have some cash left over. And at the time, you might feel like you're missing out on the opportunity of a lifetime. Because believe me, securities and investment fraudsters are really great at making you feel like what they're selling is the next big thing. And they may have a they may have a pitch whereby they make you feel like it's urgent. If you don't invest now, you're going to get left out of the next Apple or the next Google, and you have the chance to get into the ground floor. You got to do it right away. these situations often aren't like that. Usually the person who is more cautious and decides not to invest in the beginning winds up the happiest in the end because they missed out on losing a lot of money on transactions. I've seen that, where people who were careful, decided not to invest, wound up looking pretty smart in the end. So overall, I invite you to remember, don't be fooled by fancy talk about things you don't understand. If you don't understand the investment, if the technology doesn't make sense to you, if it promises a tremendous rate of return, don't invest. And if you're thinking about it, talk to a lawyer first. They can help. Thanks very much, and I wish you all the best in your investing ventures.